Good morning. So I just wanted to do a shorter video here and review a couple of the planes that I'd mentioned I was going to download and fly. The first one obviously on the screen right now is the Eurofighter. I really love the look of this airplane. I know it's a really high performance fighter jet. Really looking forward to flying this plane before I downloaded it and installed it and had a chance to actually jump in on it. But very quickly there were a number of concerns. First, on the view here, I could see some of the textures were seemingly mapped on top of other textures. And I know they can sometimes layer things in that way, but it really made the plane flicker and kind of look funky a number of times. Second, this is the cockpit view. The camera is stuffed all the way forward at the front of the canopy. And so if I physically turn all the way around, I'm in front of the heads-up display. Now, in the description for the airplane, the creator mentions that you need to set your camera to -20, but I really don't like having to modify my camera just to fly one specific plane and then go put it back for all the others. So I figured at least up front, I'll try to fly the plane externally, see how much I like it, and if I do like it, then I'll maybe go figure that out. Startup was fun. I enjoyed seeing the flame kick off for one engine and then the second one. Taxiing was kind of crazy. The plane accelerates very quickly. I loved the fact that they added some afterburner exhaust to the model. Makes it a lot more fun and realistic, even though it may not look the best. It's at least an attempt, and I really hope to see that get a lot better when Microsoft or Asobo add in the fighting jet update later this year, early next year, whenever that comes out. Now, takeoff was a breeze. The plane, as you can see, seems to roll a little bit. Felt a little top-heavy, as it were, because I kept having to tip the plane back and forth to keep it flying level. Once the tail kind of tipped more to one side, then the plane would continue to roll that way. In this, I did notice that the roll is really top-notch. The plane rolls left and right really well. However, the elevator control is utterly abysmal. And I know that a lot of planes, especially the next airplane that we'll look at, the F-22, limit the amount of elevator control that you have and even disable the rudders depending on the speed you're flying just to keep the plane from destroying itself. But at the speeds I was flying right now, this is 100% elevator engagement and I am barely moving. I think at takeoff I initially tried to pull a lot harder to see what would happen, and just nothing happened. So really disappointed in the Eurofighter because this makes it virtually unflyable. I can, even at slow speeds, and I mean really slow speeds, the plane just would not maneuver up and down, and that just was a complete changer for me. So I had to uninstall that plane, and I quickly jumped into the F-22, which immediately loaded the cockpit correctly. While the external model textures did look a little bit toyish or cartoony, they did look realistic overall towards the real airplane, and it was a lot of fun to get into the cockpit. The controls in here seemed a little bit limited, but they did call out that while the plane is still under development, they do have a number of the functions working. So once I powered on the batteries, it was great to see the screens come online. They are fully functioning. Oh, well, I won't say fully functioning, but the screens do function, and some of them you can actually get in there and modify settings. So the screen on the bottom left, or I guess the middle left there, next to my runway, was the external view, and it was great to be able to modify that to the map so that I could use my bigger VFR map for larger views, and it was just really good to be able to have a functioning airplane. I also liked that the nozzles for the thrust actually work, so you can do some vectored thrust, which is just like the real airplane. But the plane was a little hard to get driving straight down on the runway, and you can kind of see the tail get out of line a little bit, which was a little funky. I believe I saw a post that they are working on some of that, but overall, this plane was a joy to fly. You can see great roll control, and even at slow speeds, I was able to use the elevators to dip myself away from that big jumbo jet before it teleported ahead of me. But I had much better control of the airplane, and when I throttled back, the plane slowed down a little better, and it felt much more like I was an airplane pushing through the air. And you can see I'm moving roughly about the same speed as I was in the Eurofighter, but you can see that while I have limited elevator control, the plane was actually pulling up and pushing down, unlike the Eurofighter. So not I mean, it is limited, but it was enough for me to be able to control the airplane, and it was more within a line of expectations for the speeds that I was going. And the faster I went, the more limited it got. But again, that makes sense when you're breaking the speed of sound or doing some certain types of maneuvers. But you can see here I'm just at slow speeds, just playing with how much it's rolling or how much it's pulling and all of that. And it was much more in line with other fighter jet games I've played, and just other experiences to let me know that it may not be perfect, it may not be 100% accurate, but at least it's much more than the Eurofighter was, unfortunately. Now, the game itself did struggle a little bit to keep up with the airplane flying at this speeds, especially when we look at the VR video, which will be the next video. The game at times was lagging behind, streaming in some of the textures and some of the models because the plane was moving faster than the models could pull the information down and then apply the textures and then add the bump maps to make everything more detailed. So it was kind of interesting to watch all that stream in. And again, these are things that I would expect the game to be able to pull in a little better once I load into an area. It's obvious I'm going to be flying around it. And I know they don't want to download 100% of the data, similar to like Battle Royale games like PUBG, where you look off in the distance with an 8x scope and you can see the terrible models just because your view distance is greater than the game's rendering in. And I know they do some stuff like this. I would hope that knowing that I'm flying in a certain direction, they would start to queue certain things up and apply things a little faster, and we'll see how far they get with that. But this plane was really fun to fly. The sounds of the engines, the maneuverability, the cockpit, it was just a great plane to fly. And it made it a lot of fun because I was able to kind of enjoy the environment a little more. While it is fun to pop in a Cessna or a Caravan or even the passenger jets to fly around, you don't always get to see as much of the world unless you start slewing or doing a bunch of loading into different airports to fly around. Whereas if you jump in the F-22, the plane's fast enough that you can fly to a number of different locations in real time and actually get to cruise around them and enjoy them and say, hey, you know what, I'd like to come back here in a smaller plane and maybe do some seaplane flying, or maybe I'd like to do an airline flight along this route because it's really pretty and fun. So it kind of gives you a chance to preview some things before you head out. The other thing I really liked about this was how stable the airplane was, because even when I was rolled to a side, the plane didn't continue to roll like the Eurofighter had. It was basically stable once I put it in a position and it held there. Now I know there's a bit of drift and there's a bit of wind and those things will impact the plane, but in this it was not a concern. So the fact that I really did not have to trim very often, and I was able to just enjoy massive climb rates, do steep dives, do some maneuvers, loops, barrel rolls, all of that without having to constantly adjust my trims and worry about thrust and all these different things. It worked out so well. And I really liked the HUD as well because it gave me so much solid information so quickly that it made it just a joy to be able to fly the airplane at those speeds and focus on flying instead of trying to move around the cockpit to handle the 15, 16 different controls that may need to be modified for any specific situation. Now, I flew from San Francisco up to Seattle, which was a bit of a flight. There was a big mountain that'll come in here on the left of the screen that I flew over to and around, and then I zipped over here to Seattle, which was kind of fun. I don't remember exactly which volcano that is. Honestly, I'm not even going to try to say it because it's probably wrong. But I came into Seattle, I looped around to the north and came in over the Boeing airfield, and this was where I was going to try some of the low flight stability. And I feel that the airplane was a little bit too stable at lower speeds. There was a bit of a ground wind that you've seen when I'm in even a big Airbus or even a 747, the one time I flew it. The wind really does impact these airplanes and push them along. And I know I'm in a fighter, but I'm not exactly moving very quickly at this point. I'm running about 160 knots at the moment, and ultimately I slowed down to about 140 on this approach. And this plane would have been blown sideways or maneuvered a lot more. I really was not doing much other than just slight left-right adjustments. So I feel at the lower speeds, the plane's stability was a little bit questionable, but it was a lot of fun to come in here over the Boeing airport and then head into Seattle's main international airport here. And I was really able to use the PAPI lights to control the airplane. And again, I really did not touch my trims more than once or twice on this approach. And being able to use the HUD for the roll indicator and the headering, all these different things made it really nice for me to be able to stay on a good glide slope, because I had all the horizon information, my degree of attack, all of that was right there in my face, very easy to use. So I look at it once or twice, and then the plane just kind of hung on to that point so I could just continue flying. Now, where I did run into a few issues was I really wasn't sure how the plane would run at its minimum. So when I got in a lot closer and come up for the approach, I was still going a little bit faster than I probably should have, but I wasn't sure how well it would handle the flare. I did manage to have a nice overall smooth landing and enjoyed the slowdown period. When I exited the runway, it was a little bit of initial D Tokyo drift situation, which is very unrealistic and very humorous, but it was a lot of fun to fly the plane. And overall, that's my review. For this being a complete free airplane, they've done a fantastic job. And even if they don't fix anything beyond where it's at now, I do recommend giving this plane a shot if you want to have some fighter jet fun, because it is a great plane to fly. Yes, it goes way too fast before it hits overspeed. Yes, it can fly ridiculously high, but it also flies really well, and it's fun to be in there in a different mindset and enjoy the game in a slightly different way than you have previously. And being able to fly great distances in short order, and even if you pretend you had an in-flight air refueling to be able to go across the country, it is a lot of fun. And it was just a different way of playing the game, and it really was a good time. So definitely recommend this airplane, and I look forward to seeing what other updates and changes they bring to this to make the plane handle more realistically, fly a little better. Especially when Asobo brings out the next upgrade to the game that allows the other jets that they're planning to put in here. So I really hope that's kind of where we see the game clean up a little bit and function a little better. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Enjoy my drift here in a second. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.